Hello there, I'm Jeremy Brim. Welcome to the Modernising Construction podcast with Mid Group. Really interesting episode today. So I'm joined by my colleague Steve Chudley, who's head of all things BIM design at Mid Group, to talk about our OCLA approach as a business, kind of a founding cornerstone of our approach to modern methods of construction and where we see things going. So hopefully some useful content. Let's get into it. Hi Steve, how are you?
I'm all good, thank you very much. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, chap, not too bad. All the better for getting to hang out with you for a bit to talk about some interesting stuff. So thanks for making the time for it. So episode 2 of the Modernising Construction podcast with Mid Group. And we've done I've got a previous episode in the can that will go out week commencing the 22nd of November about our black and white building, timber building, all of that good stuff that I did with Graham Turner, which is a bit of a project specific. But I probably got these 2 episodes the wrong way round, actually, because this one is really the heart of Mid Group, our approach to MMC, and talking through some of the whys and wherefores about that. So we're probably cart before the horse, but better late than never, why not? But we should do introductions first of all, shouldn't we, Steve? So tell us a bit about yourself first of all.
Yes, I'm Stephen Chudley. I'm the BIM Design and Technology Director for Mid Group. I've been with the business pretty much since the business started, really, very early days, so September 2015. Brought into the business to build the BIM and design management capabilities. It's always been central to the Mid Group way of doing business, has been the focus on BIM. So personally myself, I've had 20 plus years within the construction industry, primarily as a main contractor, engineer by background, and I've had a strong interest in the BIM side of life. I guess now for at least 11 years, I think. So I first came across and using BIM on a major hospital project, and the time-saving element of that brought to me. As soon as I saw it working, I was sold sort of in an absolute instant, and I never wanted to go back to doing anything other than BIM ever again. And by and large, I managed to do that. I did have a short stint where I couldn't use BIM, and that just helped to reinforce that kind of thought processes that I had developed since then. So since 2015, I've been running the internal part of BIM within Mid Group. So we have our own in-house team, Sterling BIM, and I've been sort of building that part of the business and running that part of the business as well. So full focus now across, as I say, BIM design and technology across the piece. And it's really about trying to leverage and make sure the BIM works across the business for us, really. Very good.
You've inspired me. We should probably have another episode specifically about BIM another time, actually. We'll do a bit more of a deep dive on that, because it's a core part of today's conversation, but not all encompassing. And Sterling BIM's quite interesting, because we've got a team of 12 people, is it, out in Jordan?
It is, yeah. It is very interesting. So when we sort of started as a very small business, it became quite tricky and to actually make sure that we really started to use the BIM without investing heavily. And so we took the decision ourselves to build that requirement ourselves. And so we built a team based in Jordan, principally because the owner at that time had a business in Jordan as well, and we could find that capability easier in Jordan. So we've got a team of 12, 13 people out there, and then they're not just modelers, they are consultants as well, so they really understand the design of buildings. So it's not just someone sort of modelling and not really understanding what they're modelling. They really understand what they're doing with it all, and we've built that capability to really start to deliver some of our designs now. So they do things like temporary works for the business. They do reinforcement detailing in 3D. So we do full detailing for all of our schemes in 3D. So we're starting to build that capability. We do things like thermal modelling as well. We've done some thermal modelling out there. So there's a whole host of different elements that we've got within our team, but constantly building on that capability as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the quite a few things in the business that are quite different to a traditional main contractor, I would say, because although the investment might not be quite as much with in Jordan than if we had that number of people in the UK, in terms of headcount, let's say we're about the same size at 100 million turnover as a business unit of one of the major, multi-billion turnover contractors, and they'd probably have a BIM person in the business unit at best, and then some design managers perhaps that would play around the edges with it. Whereas we've really over-invested in that space. We have design managers on top of that report to you too. So it's a really key enabler in how, I've been saying to clients, and slap my wrist if you like, but we've got more in our DNA with a motoring manufacturer than we do with other contractors in our approach. So let's get into that, and let's see if I'm making that up or if it's vaguely true, because it could be either. So. So in terms of our approach as an organisation, I think the value for the listeners, viewers in this episode, and bearing in mind, the theme of the podcast is about modernising construction. Let's talk about how we do things differently and our approach. So you gave a presentation to the ICE recently, which in effect this almost becomes a kind of an audio version, if you like, of some of that conversation. So go for it, Steve. Give us those base principles about how we approach construction compared to a traditional contractor.
Yeah, so I suppose in the first point, it's a little bit about kind of setting out what the traditional process might be, which we've found as being, it can be quite disjointed in terms of you have consultants and designers talking to clients, trying to understand a brief, trying to put together a set of modelling information with incomplete information, with incomplete data. That they don't know how the building's going to go together, they don't know what the connection details are, and they're not particularly interested in that at the early stages of the project. So they're making assumptions quite early on in that process, based on fairly incomplete data. And then what that introduces then is, once you get a sort of a pricing exercise done, and you might get a main contractor involved in the scheme, you might end up re-engineering that. And you end up kind of working that, discarding some of the work that's been done. And then you only really start to get value in that process by talking to the contractors and the fabricators right at the end of that piece. So it can be a very, very disjointed process as you go through lots and lots of rework and inefficiencies. So where we look at doing things quite markedly quite different is that we'll really introduce our key trusted subcontractors and fabricators into that process and into that mix very, very early on in the process. As early as we possibly can in that process, we'll get our subcontractors undertaking their works. So it will go so far as an example of that being our engineer won't model the sort of structure of the building, because we've got our SIPs manufacturer or our precast concrete manufacturer to do that for us. So they won't actually do that modelling in the first place. So that whole work and that whole effort piece that the structural engineer might have to go through is much more reduced, and we get the actual specialists based on that fabrication data from the very, very outset. So that's what we've done in terms of changing that traditional process and sort of turning it on its head with a very much with a focus around offsite and those modern methods of construction. That was almost the first step in the process. We're then looking at to try to take that kind of beyond that and then thinking about how do we actually do that? How do we take that beyond that, and how do we get even better at doing that? And this is where we start to build our BIM object libraries and our kind of our platform design, I suppose, is the way that you could look at calling it. So we end up having a sort of little a BIM component library set of our trusted suppliers that we've collectively built up. And when we start to look at a project, that's the set of data that we give to our consultant teams to start to build our models out. And all of that BIM data, we know kind of the costing information for that. We know how the connection details go together. We've got a whole sort of pack. Initially, we built that around our school solution. So for our school solution, we've got an absolutely dedicated set of connection details, BIM object libraries, costing data, all of that information all wrapped up into a single sort of component set, if you like, which is the OCLA, the Optimised Component-Led Approach. And so at the outset of a school project, we'll provide that to the consultant teams, and they'll use that component set to build the designs and to build that school that we want to go and construct. And that's how we kind of build up a design from the outset with a full set of as-built almost information, or certainly as fabricated set of information, so that you know that you're going to hit the program cost constraints that you have at the very, very outset of any design process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like such common sense when you say it like that. It's a bit mad how the industry has tended to work, but it's, I've said in some speeches and other things that we're 45 years behind the motor manufacturing industry as a industry or sector, and I think this takes us some way down to solving that. And there's a couple of things that sort of tripped off the tongue for you there that are actually quite a big deal. So having that integrated cost data is one thing, but it's not cost plan data, it's real as-built data. So, last time we built it, or certainly, latest interaction with the supply chain. So that's a really big deal. I'm not sure anybody else is doing that. It's common sense, but, it's the fact that we've got that pre-assembled supply chain bought into this. We've done that work together, and there's work to do around embodied carbon and loads of other, OPEX data, etc. we've been talking about recently. And then the other really big deal, which is the, as you put it, the connections, how that stuff all plugs together on site, because that's where a lot of MMC projects go wrong. It's the interface between major components, even if it's a volumetric solution. Where they can go wrong is how it literally sits on the ground, the enabling works around it, all of that kind of stuff. And there's a hell of a lot of work, from what I understand, gone into understanding how all these components can slot together on site in assembly.
Absolutely, and this isn't the end of the process either. It's a building process, and we have built that, and we have experienced some connection details that we've had to hone and change and update. So we had a sort of a little bit of a movement joint issue between some of our SIPS panels on some of the earlier projects that we've had to look at. How do we solve that? How do we overcome that? Right, there's the detail, there's the updated detail into the new pack of information. And we're looking at to sort of try to improve those details and the products, and we're looking to improve that all the time. It's not a static set of solutions that's it, it's finished, it's in a box, done. We're always trying to sort of evolve that. But yeah, the key part of that is actually understanding how it goes together. And as I say, and capturing that learning from every site that we do to try to make sure that the next one's better, and the next one, we just continually improve. And it doesn't, I think it's sort of accepting that we're not going to get it absolutely perfect the first time. But we've got to start and we've got to build, and that's the approach that we take, is to make sure that actually we gather the learning, build every time on the solution.
Okay, Steve, thanks for outlining that. It's really quite interesting where we are and where the market is. We had an interesting scenario recently where we had an SQ, a pre-qualification piece for a public sector client, where they asked for the CVs and names of all of the people that had been on an example project that we'd delivered. We'd written the case study up. Then the next question was, tell us about the structure of people who were on that job. And we've got through actually to tender. I've got to lead the tender in the coming weeks, which is fantastic. But I was really worried actually we wouldn't get through because it's all about primary schools in this instance. And for a particular primary school project we only had 3 people on site because we got a project manager, project director, a commercial person, and then a site manager. Whereas if you were building a primary school traditionally, you'd have all kinds of people, wouldn't you? And a much bigger team than that, because most of our activity is happening in the factory, and ever so more as we continue to digitize that component library, and it all really comes together with all the additionality benefits of, we're not moving boxes of air around. It's not volumetric in that regard. It's all minimized transport, all of that stuff. So we should probably talk through an example, actually, because we've got a great case study with Broxbourne School in Hertfordshire, haven't we?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the culmination of all of that learning through a number of other projects. It's kind of the end of certainly a new point in the roadmap. So talk me through how that project unfolded, leveraging the approach that we've got.
Yeah, so it's quite typical of how we've kind of ended up coming into projects, which has happened sort of a number of times throughout our business journey, if you like, where clients have sort of gone out to the market and not got the answer that they needed in terms of sort of hitting cost plans and the like. So we sort of come on board, have a look at the design, see how and where we can best implement our component solution. Convert's probably too strong a word. It's quite often it's about adjusting. And it's about sort of tweaking and kind of tightening and kind of nudging, and it's not a full right. We're going to change everything about the design. It's not about that sort of part of the process, but it is about reverting to our component-led approach. And by doing that, it meant that we could hit that client budget, which nobody else in the market had managed to do at the time. So that was how we ended up Broxbourne School, because we managed to hit that client requirement, and we've managed to convert that. We're using our SIPS panels, precast concrete flooring, and we've managed to sort of convert it so much that we've actually managed to reduce the cost of that to enable additional elements that the client and the school had thought that they had lost to the scheme. We managed to bring them back in, so there's been some additional sort of cut and walling areas, additional windows. They've been brought back into the scheme, enhancements to the scheme, if you like, that have only been possible because we've sort of brought that base build cost plan down so substantially to allow those enhancements to come back into the scheme.
Okay. And again, something I've been saying, and we should check if I'm right, is that generally where we're given a shot at the title like that, because that was a Section 106 school, it wasn't through a framework, etc. It was being paid for by the developer, and so we were able to access it because we're waiting to hear if we're on a number of frameworks currently, like the DFE and some other ones. But we're not on a plethora of frameworks like many of the major contractors at the moment. So it's great when we get a shot at public sector projects or public sector adjacent projects like that. But we're 20% quicker, 20% cheaper where we're given a shot.
Yeah.
And that's the case with Broxbourne.
Yeah,
to the point where it was slightly awkward, wasn't it? We finished the project, so we had to pay for some security because they weren't ready to take it.
Indeed. There were some substantial benefits, but another benefit that we had is that, and this is even through the life of our kind of evolution with the scheme, is that there were a third less snags on the building as there were early on in our approach. So it's not only is it 20% cheaper, 20% faster, there are less defects on it as well. So you're getting a better quality product in less time with less cost. It's sort of a bit of a sort of win-win all the way around, really.
But even on the snags point, though, there must be a lot less snags in our building than building traditionally, because it's all built and quality checked in the factory and then just slotted together. So it's a third.
Well, indeed. And all I'm comparing from is from our evolution over time. So that's to show that even in our lifetime of the OCLA, we've reduced the amount of snags from already a low base. We've gone even lower than that. So there's that demonstrates the evolution of that OCLA and how we work with our suppliers and just understanding the scheme better and better and better. And it's that kind of it's repeat work without always developing the same school. And that's another really, really key point to bring to bear for the OCLA, is by providing some really strong guidelines to consultants and our sort of designers. It means that they can really, really focus on what they're great at. So an architect can focus on designing a great building whilst hitting all the briefing elements for the client. Engineers can focus on honing down the most efficient solution that they can without kind of lots and lots of rework. So we get the right people doing the right thing at the right time. It means that we get a really efficient approach, and that's where that 20% cost time benefit can be brought to bear. And that's kind of how it works, really. But it's really important to note that they're not identikit kind of solutions. It's not the same building every time. There's a lot of flexibility in the system. But by specifying, we introduce flexibility in the system and capability to produce great designs without compromising on cost and quality and time.
Yeah, but you've got that library of parts that the architects, designers can use with that flexibility, with number of different sub-solutions within it. Lightweight gauge steel for one bit, SIPs for another, whatever it is. Because even Broxbourne was actually two different approaches, wasn't it, within one school?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's SIPs panels in a certain area, and then it's concrete in another area. So it's about kind of choosing the right solution for the right product, for the right methodology, for the right kind of project, site constraints, all of that. And as I say, in some areas of the same site, we might end up with a different solution. That's not the first time we've ended up with. I think Leamington Fields was a fairly similar sort of scenario. You've got reinforced concrete in one area of the build, and the fully SIPs panel in another part. And we can pick and choose, and we will only choose the right solution for the right part of a project and for the right project. So it's very much about choosing the right thing, choosing the right thing at the right time in that process to enable the designs to be completed once in the most efficient manner that we possibly can.
And getting away from the classic architectural round window that has to be specifically engineered, manufactured, all of that kind of guff that we can't afford, certainly won't be able to afford in the UK moving forwards for a while. So what's next, do you reckon, Steve? What's that we can talk about? Obviously, we don't want to give IP away. We're not about the technology that we're using, but where does it go from here? I mean, I guess we're in this awkward. I was talking about it with Graham on the black and white timber building conversation. I guess in terms of net zero and that agenda, having just been through COP26, I guess we'd love to do more CLT timber type stuff, but there's certainly in the resi market, there's that butting up against the Hackett report and building regs and insurance and all that kind of stuff. But I guess what's one thing you're looking forward to in the next couple of years that we?
One thing, yeah, quite. I suppose it's more that there's a lot of things that I think are going to change and improve. Certainly, one of the things for me is about data and about even more harvesting of data. So the construction industry does create an awful lot of data when you start to really look at it and look into it. But actually, quite a lot of it is siloed, and we don't really analyse it, and we don't really look at it, and we don't really get under the bonnet of it and start to sort of use some of that analytical approach to data that other industries do. So that's going to be a really big thing for me. That is a constant thing for me at the moment, is to try to develop and bring that data handling and that data sort of moving away from silos, connecting the dots between all of the data that we create, and sort of becoming better at predicting and analysing and honing in on what those right solutions are. So that's certainly one thing which is going to be really kind of changing in the next few years, I think, as an industry-wide approach. But I think it is about creating more and more of these component libraries, if you like, with more and more solutions, with more and more suppliers to build that knowledge base, that capability base, so it can be a full requirement to whatever the needs of the construction industry, whatever the needs of our clients is. So is it, if for a residential scheme, what does a particular client want, for example? Do they want a fantastically sustainable building, is that their prime driver? Well, we need to respond to that, and how might we respond to that? So things like the value toolkit, which has been produced, so that clients can kind of choose and identify what their real values are for a project, working out to respond to that on a sector by sector basis. That's also going to be kind of another prime driver to make sure that we've got all of that response available in a component library and a component set.
Very good. And funnily enough, again, I've got in mind to have a particular episode about the value toolkit piece, perhaps with someone external coming in and having that conversation with us, more of a panel discussion to come, probably next year, I would say. Well, that's been a really useful conversation, Steve. Thank you. I'm sure some people will find that valuable. Some of our competitors might, but to be honest, by the time they catch up, hopefully we'll be off in the distance doing something else. So, but it's important to share these things because we need to move forward as an industry, don't we? So one last, the gimmicky podcast bit, I guess, Steve. What's been your your best achievement whilst you've been with Mid Group? What's the thing you're most proud of?
Yeah, I would. It's probably the virtual reality, getting the virtual reality produced on Brighton 3Ts. That was the first time I'd ever produced this virtual reality kind of model, and it's the entire hospital kind of with all of the equipment, everything. And there's always a moment when you build something, when you go into it, and it's always been up until that point. It's always been when you actually step into the building and you see it for the first time, and it's been transformed from paper and what's in your head into this physical kind of beast. And I experienced that with the goggles on 3 years before we'd even got anywhere close to building this thing on Brighton Hospital. So you actually walk into the main entrance, and I walked into the main entrance in the virtual reality world, and it felt like I was there. I experienced that space for the first time, and that was really kind of it's pretty awesome, really pretty awesome
stuff. I mean, again, that's a great example actually that I'd not thought to raise in our prep for this. That of course Sterling BIM is a consulting proposition as well as an internal service proposition to our business. So we do sell that as a consultancy piece, and Brighton 3Ts was where you were acting as a technical advisor and visualization provider for consultations internally with the physicians, etc. So and it is, when I went and did an exhibition with you guys a little while ago, we'd pulled together a video for a screen on our stand on that stuff, and it is impressive. But bearing in mind, how many years old is that now? It's impressive.
It's 4 years old, so 4 years ago.
So the thing that, obviously I previous employers, I used to get into the visualizations game for big bids and things, and thought it was impressive then. And obviously we're not going to give IP away and talk about particular platforms and things like that. But just having a chat with you in the office one day over a coffee, and you showed me some stuff, I was like, bloody hell, the game's moved on in that 4 years since I was interfacing with this stuff. The ability to sort of take on board a client's model and the professional team's model, and then run that almost instantaneously as a proper full visualization, and so you can really see the clashes or that kind of stuff. That quality you've now got is impressive, I have to say.
And the real difference is it's so the visualizations game, it used to be about kind of making things look kind of nice, and then you stick it in a box, and it's not really based on anything too much. It was always generally based on the architecture model, but the models that we produce for Brighton and for any of our visualizations, they're based on the real data. So they're based on contractors' models. They're based on it's the information that the guys on site are going out to build with. It's that same information. So when we produce a VR, it's the same as what's going to be built, and that's really different, and that's what the technology moving on has allowed to bring all of that, and our skills and our capabilities to bring that all to bear, so that we can actually show really, really high quality visualizations that match what's going to be built. And that for me has been the biggest game changer really over the last sort of few years, and so that's why it's connected. It was a great moment when we first did that. It was really cool.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Steve. I think that's been really useful. I'm sure people will find it valuable, and like I say, I'm sure we'll find other things to talk about in the coming months and years. It's an ever-moving feast, and what you're doing, your function's right at the heart of what's different about the organisation and where the industry needs to go. So I look forward to next time. Thank you very much.
Excellent. No worries. Anytime.
So great to share some content there on our OCLA approach and how that influences the business at Mid Group. Hopefully you've found that useful. It's really fascinating getting to work with Steve day to day on how we approach our work with clients and communities and where we see things going. There's lots more to come in that space. There's only so much we can tell you, obviously, at this point without giving IP away, but there's a fair amount there to get your teeth into, hopefully. So what have we got to come? We've still got a episode with David Merrills, our area director for the Southwest, on an interesting project specific we have in Bristol, a really innovative project on the banks of the river there, but also a conversation about the Southwest and the Western Gateway through South Wales and the Southwest, and what we find there in terms of the supply chain and how we think it needs to be industrialised, or certainly some change needs to come. So we'll have that conversation. And then there's future episodes to come where we're going to invite some external people in, consultants, stakeholders, clients, in the coming weeks and months on things like the value toolkit and other conversations to be had. So please do keep joining us. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you next time. Thank you.